Hi, everybody. That's some good maple syrup right there. So, hi, Canada. I promised Bob I'd wear this flag with pride. He's had so much hospitality, and he has indeed made us real Canadians. We're all Canadians today. It's a beautiful country. Vancouver's great. It reminds me a lot of Denver. It reminds me a lot of Colorado. You guys ever been to Colorado? A few people. You should come. It's just like Canada, except for you can own guns. We love freedom. So this is ETC. This is the summit. ETC is a hell of a community. You know, it's a very diverse community. It's a very decentralized community. It's a community that is filled with lots of different opinions. There is no monoculture here. Some of you like me. Some of you do not like me and have made that known on Twitter. And I appreciate that. We've had some great fights, too. Despite all of that, keeps on chugging. ETC is the smart contract honey badger. It just doesn't care about me, about you. It just does its thing. It'll be here tomorrow. It'll be here the day after. We're in the worst recession of our industry's history, and despite all of that, ETC is still going strong. We're still here. We're still having fun. We're still building things. It's a more mature ecosystem, a more diverse ecosystem today than it was in Hong Kong when we did the first summit, than it was in Korea when we did the second summit. And the fourth year, it'll be even better. We get along now with Ethereum. That's pretty surprising. Virgil, where are you at? Ah, there he is. Hey, we get along with this guy. The first time he met me, he showed up in a BitConnect shirt. I think he was trying to make a statement or something like that. Now, actually, pretty chill. The relationship's good. And I know, right? It's pretty amazing. So that's exciting. And, you know, it's fun to be part of this community, and it's fun to contribute to it. So we built the Mantis client. Anybody ever used that? Yeah, the Etherno guys over there. Yeah. You like it? Yeah, it's the best, right? It's just incredible. Well, I have to confess, I told a little white lie. So when I was announcing that we're going to stop working on Mantis, that was technically true, but we didn't actually liquidate the team. We just kept building stuff. You see, let's have a little history lesson. Let's go back to 2015 when IOHK first got the contract to build Cardarno. It was a tremendously exciting time. We basically got a mandate to go build something with a complete blank slate, do tons of research, and play around, see what we could construct. So we had no idea whether proof of stake worked. To de-risk that, we had an alternative team working on proof of work. And they were looking into all kinds of cool technology, DAG stuff and new incentive things and concepts like NEPA POWs. Have you guys ever heard of Fly Client? A few people? That's where that came from. We invented the foundations for it. We also, at the same time, were very curious about privacy. And we said to ourselves, what can you do there? What's this snark stuff all about? So we just started thinking about it. We wrote a paper called Sonic, which is a huge improvement over the latest and greatest state of the art. And we also just released a paper a few days ago. In fact, Cody's reading it. Called Kachina. You like it? It's a pretty cool paper, huh? Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. Well, anyway, we had all this stuff with mixed nets and private computation and cool stuff with Sonic. It's a whole new snark. And we had this brand new, awesome proof of work algorithm that's super high performance, like thousands of TPS, and all the incentives perfectly aligned. And we said, shit, God, that'd be fun to build. So then, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in Eurocrypt, and usually these stories involve some semblance of alcohol. And I was with my chief scientist probably about 1:30 in the morning, and we were in Israel. And we said, how about we just start building some of this stuff and see where it goes? And he's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And I said, you know, when we're sober in the morning, we'll talk about it again. And if it sounds like a good idea, we'll do it. And so in the morning, we woke up and kind of stumbled with a little bit of a headache. And we said, does it still sound like a good idea? And he said, you know, it might be the hangover talking, but it does. And we said, yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. So we just started building it. We liquidated the entire Mantis team, both the Polish side and the Argentine side, and we pulled them all in and had 18 people working full time, QAs and all, writing all kinds of cool code every 6 weeks, and a little internal skunk works, bit by bit, thinking carefully about how do we put all this stuff together. And we didn't have a particular focus or goal or idea in mind. This was a purely creative project, and it was a lot of fun. It's Scala code. We get to use formal methods. We get to do all this cool stuff. We have no investors or constituents. It was just spending money to go see if we could do something really, really cool. Well, anyway, that was the skunk works. And somewhere along the way, we said, well, wait a minute. This would make a pretty good product. This could actually be something that could be the future of an ecosystem. So one of the reasons I came here was to try to get an appetite, try to get a sense of the appetite of the Ethereum Classic community, the Ethereum Classic ecosystem. Some hard decisions have to be made in the next few years. Every ecosystem has to make them. Nothing is static in this space. You know, when I first came here, our biggest conversation was things like Litecoin versus Bitcoin, Feathercoin versus Litecoin, these types of things. And there was no difference outside of a small parameter change in the emission and the consensus algorithm's mining algorithm. That's it. The code was the same. And that was enough. Then suddenly Ethereum came, and then suddenly we had to have smart contracts and all this other differentiating stuff. And then somewhere along the way, VCs came in, and somewhere along the way, scientists came in. And we see the algorithms and the hash graphs and all these other really curious, very unique, and very interesting projects. And no tone vays, they're not all scams. They're real. They have a right to exist. There's real people behind them. In many cases, they're doing really cool and innovative things with governance and in interoperability. And they're forcing us to have philosophical discussions as an ecosystem about what does privacy mean? What does interoperability mean? When EOS, for example, says it's decentralized, we scoff. Okay, because they have 21 centralized nodes that mostly run the same infrastructure. But then Bitcoin is controlled by about 4 mining pools and 4 major operations, and they're not exactly the best of people. Okay, so it just depends on your perspective. And you say, well, that's different. And we say, well, but how and why? And is it egalitarian? Do we have first access to those ASICs? Do we have access to the infrastructure? It's economy of scale business. I can't play that game anymore. I used to mine. I can't do it anymore. I'd have to invest millions of dollars to be competitive, and it's a big effort. So what do we mean when we say decentralized? What do we mean when we say privacy? What is privacy? Transactional privacy, network privacy? Is it always private, or is it just private to the general public, but then certain actors get to see it? And then we say immutability. What does that mean? Well, okay, they never change the record. Okay, well, what happens when the blockchain's a petabyte? Well, who stores that, and who has access to that, and who will give you access to that? You know, how do we handle these compressed representations? And it's now an availability problem. There are big philosophical questions, and we were not handed a manual on how to answer all these things. We're figuring it out as a community and as an ecosystem. The point of this project that we started after we retired Mantis publicly was to start just thinking about one particular topic that we were really interested in. We really wanted to see how far we could push private computation. See, one of the Achilles heels of the smart contract model at the moment is what you're doing, everyone else can see. So if you have a smart contract, you have inputs, you have outputs, you have code, and that's public by design, right? But there's all kinds of things in the world that don't really work that way, nor should they work that way. For example, would you like everybody to see your bank ledger? Would you like people to see your medical records? If you're going to perform operations and actions and run stateful programs on things, some of those programs should be kept secret. Some of those programs should have secret inputs and secret outputs, and only certain people should be able to see that. We'd like to know that the calculation's censorship resistant. We'd like to know that it's going to be high fidelity, meaning what you ask for is what you get, but we'd also like to keep a secret every now and then, because maybe we're required to by law, or maybe there's a commercial reality behind that. Maybe I'm a hedge fund and I don't want to reveal my trading strategy. Who cares? It's my business, it's my computation. So we wrote a paper called Kachina, and I'd highly encourage you to look at it and read it. We just released it. It was a heck of a lot of work. And the paper actually outlines a generic framework for how to handle private computation with smart contracts. And then I started thinking, if we could marry this with a few dozen other innovations, suddenly we would have a great ecosystem. Suddenly we'd have something that Ethereum doesn't have. And even in an attempt to get it will cost way too much, and it would be such a diversion from their current roadmap, they're not going to get it for a long time. And suddenly we can offer something to developers that they've never seen before. See, that's why I signed up for this space. And it's why I don't work on Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. I love it like a child. It was my first currency. I created educational materials for it. In fact, there's some people in this room who took my class way back in the day. And it's humbling. It's amazing. And it was so much fun being in Bitcoin. But the problem was every single time I thought about broadening the scope of things it could do, it was impossible to innovate. There were so many barriers, so many no's, so many processes, even extending the block size is a war. So I got driven into the altcoin space out of necessity because I have this desire to wake up every day and say, can we explore a topic, whether it be pruning a ledger or privacy or what does a financial operating system look like? That's the problem of the Cardarno is trying to... I guess people don't like Cardarno. But anyway, in a little bit, right around maybe the end of Q1 of 2020, we're almost going to be ready to start talking about this publicly and showing people the code and showing people what we've done. And we're really curious if the Ethereum Classic ecosystem would like to go down this road. You see, the great part about a permissionless decentralized ecosystem is no one is in charge. All there are people who show up, grab a microphone and tell you that you can go down this road if you really, really want to and make the case of why the road makes sense. And sometimes people say, yeah, I want to do that. And sometimes they say, no. But the conversation itself is where the real value comes from. You see, because it tells us who we really are as an ecosystem. Because if we say no, well, then we ask, why not? If we don't want private computation, if we don't want to change the consensus algorithm, if we don't want to change the way the network works, if we don't want recursive snarks and cool new things that can make us potentially very competitive and make us be able to do things Ethereum can't do, well, what's the alternative? There can be great answers to that question. And the very conversation is ultimately why we are stronger than Ethereum and why we are stronger than perhaps even Bitcoin. Because there's enough independence and freedom in this ecosystem such that we are free to have that conversation and still be friends and still like each other. I've had fights with pretty much everybody in here at some point in my career. Yet we're here. I'm still on the stage. That's nice, and I appreciate the invitation. I like Donald, actually. You know, actually, Donald and I, we have an interesting history. He was one of the first people in the entire cryptocurrency space to interview me. I think it was at Trident in Boulder, right? Yeah. And he still had disagreements. But that's the point. That's how you get things done. This is too complicated. There's too much philosophy. There's too many things to think about. And no one person has the answers. No one entity has the answers. No one person has the vision. Any person who says, this is the leader, this is the way, even if that person's a god, they're finite. They'll die. They'll go away. You know, so instead, what you need to think about is process over people. For Cardarno, we said we're going to do a lot of science because we're saying super controversial things like proof of stake works. There are many people, half of the space, who believe it's fake. It's perpetual motion. It can't work. It's a big, bold claim. You're saying you can do things at efficiencies that are just unimaginable. So we did a huge amount of science. We wrote all these papers. We went through the scientific process. We said, well, let's see if it's possible or not. And we did it to a point where we convinced ourselves, and we'll release something, and Ethereum's going to release something, and Algorand's going to release something. And then eventually the market will decide. Not me. Not any one person. Process over people. So over the coming months, some hard decisions are going to have to be made, and some clarity is going to have to be brought of where Ethereum is going to go, and we'll make some proposals. You guys will have a chance to see the newly resurrected Mantis. It's called something very special and cool, and we'll announce the name at some point. And you guys will have a chance to see the papers we've written and where we'd like to go and the things we'd like to do. And I would love to see what you guys have. We've already seen some great presentations over these 2 days, and we've already seen some great ideas. We've seen some great forks. Atlantis was a success. More are on the way. And we're seeing the space as a whole offering a lot of ways to innovate, a lot of cool things to do. And even if we don't get everything, you know, at least that's something. And it moves on. And if we keep this process going, then generation after generation, the product just keeps getting better. You know, sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day that we tend to forget that we're moving at speeds that are unimaginable. You know, I have a lot of friends who've been in the banking industry, the financial industry for a long time, and concepts like instantaneous settlement, instantaneous disclosures, having a perfect ledger that can never lie, programmable money, these are magic. And we have achieved more as an ecosystem in 10 years globally than any ecosystem has ever in the history of humanity. We've brought people together. We've got people thinking about collective problems. We've rewritten the entire concept of identity with self-sovereign identity, with the DID, with projects like Sovereign and Hyperledger Identity. With the concepts of smart contracts, we have lawyers in Hong Kong, at Stanford, at Harvard, down in Argentina, over in Chile. People, I was in South Africa not too long ago talking about algorithmic law, programmable law. Where is that going to go? The automation of regulation. These are things that were talked about for decades at conferences. When computers came out in the 80s, they said, oh, we'll do that. 30 years later, didn't get done. Now, not only is it getting done, we're doing it and forcing people to accept it. You know, there were so many people when I started in this industry who said, you can't. Don't try. Ask permission. And you know who? We just didn't care. No one told us to start Ethereum Classic. We were told not to do that. And we did it. No one told us to create Ethereum. We just went and did it. And no one told anybody to create Bitcoin. They just went and did it. And I'm very happy and excited to see that that ethos, that attitude, that resilience still exists within our space. In fact, I love this new term, defy. We're kind of defying the conventions, aren't we, Bob? Yeah. So that's what we've been working on. We've been building some stuff. It's pretty cool stuff. I think you guys are going to like it. We'll propose it. I hope you take it. If not, well, build something better. So having said that, thank you all so much for coming. I don't want to stand in your way between me and alcohol, so there you go. Have some fun. Enjoy the town. And if you have any questions, let me know. Cheers. And Bob, this is really good maple syrup.
Maple syrup is very good.
It's amazing. It's the best.
So we have around 10 minutes for questions. If people have questions,
now is the time.
Golden opportunity.
Yes, sir. By the way, this is the #1 dApp developer for Ethereum Classic. I think by transaction volume, right?
Yep. Thank you so much for actually talking about dApps on ETC, because there's so few of us working on it, but it's my baby. I love this. But my question is, you're talking about anonymity technology, and as I see it, there's kind of two approaches right now. You have like the Zcash Monero approach, which is anonymity embedded into the, and Grin, anonymity embedded into the base layer of the currency itself. And then we're seeing another approach, which I feel like the Ethereum community is more going towards, which is anonymity as kind of like an application level. It's a smart contract that lives on top. And I'm kind of curious, what do you think about that distinction there? Do you think that there's one approach that's better than the other?
Well, anonymity traditionally works well by scale. So the more people in your anonymity set, the better. So if you can be anonymous by default, that's good for the system. But then there's an open, interesting question of what do you mean by anonymity? So are we talking about transactional anonymity? So I can't even see the transactions in the system. Can I see the transactions, but I don't have linkability, so I can't link them to particular actors? Can I not link them, but maybe I can see the amounts, maybe I can't see the amounts? There's a lot of nuances to that. And then it gets a lot more hairy when you talk about computation. So then you kind of have two worlds, a private world and a public world. And the private world has some notion of state, and then you have to create a proof that the things you've done are preserved and correct, but then I can't actually see what you've done. And I have no way of verifying other than the proof. So now you're having a lot more faith in the mathematics, and there's an enormous amount of complexity that's introduced there. So for Kachina, we're talking about it in layers. So transactional privacy would be accomplished through a Zcash-style system, but with a better notion of that snark. That's Sonic in this case. And then for computational privacy, there's actually a private system, and then it has its own state and Then you create proofs based upon that work that's done, and those are the things that get appended. And the Kachina paper that we released actually explains in general how the system works, and we'll release a design specification a little bit later. But it's been quite a bit of work because it's a super hard problem to solve, and especially if you get too close to private computation, because it's then homomorphic encryption style stuff and nothing works. So you have to kind of cheat a little bit. But it's really nifty, interesting research. Now, what are the applications of this? Well, you know, there's all these things where I would like to run this unstoppable application, like maybe an underground newspaper, because maybe I live in Hong Kong and I'd like to tell the world a little bit about what's going on, and I don't want the Chinese government having a say in that. Okay, well, this is an example of where these types of applications would make a lot of sense. So basically you can have the infrastructure running and you can't distinguish that underground newspaper from CryptoKitties or any other application in the system. Just the users of the application would actually know that. And then there's all kinds of interesting de-anonymization questions of when and where is that secure, and can you have transitive problems where if one reveals it, they all reveal it, and so forth. And this is why it's such an exciting thing, because you can now build all new things you couldn't build before. That's pretty cool. The second thing is that you now get to think about privacy from a very different perspective. Generally, we think about privacy as a Boolean, where we have either you know it's Joe or you don't know it's Joe. And then what's the probability you know it's Joe, right? But now all of a sudden you're talking about privacy in terms of programs and privacy in terms of computation. That's a whole different ballgame because there's a whole spectrum of things you can learn emergently. Next question.
Yesterday, the presentation, I compared ETC with Fedwire transaction volumes. And then I also pointed out that I think that bloating, like in Ethereum, is going to happen also in ETC when it continues growing, etc. I think with the gas system, the miners set the gas, for example, is now at 8 million, and that is 680,000 transactions per day. I think that to compete for high value, at least in the high value segment, ETC will have to eventually do more or less like 2 million transactions per day, or 2.5 million, to cover today all the high value transactions in the world. No? Do you see there's a conflict with the bloating if we increase? Do you see a technical path to increasing scalability in that sense?
Yeah, you can get the throughput much higher through using a DAG or these types of systems, but then there are questions of bloat. And also we have, with the design we're looking at, two different accounting models. With Cardarno, we created something called extended UTXO. So we took the Bitcoin design and we just extended it a bit to actually support smart contracts. And it's really cool to do that. And you get some advantages with that system. Gas becomes more deterministic, and there's all kinds of cool things you can gain with those systems. Ethereum-style accounts are a little bit more difficult. I'm agnostic to whether things be increased or not, because it's completely contextual to the design of the system, the accounting model of the system, and ultimately how smart contracts work. And then there's also a question of transaction prioritization. So you could have a system, instead of where everything's a message and a contract and smart contract, you could have like different types of things you can do. And certain things are low cost and don't require anything, and they live in different parts of the system. And then you can also offload things into layer 2 protocols. And then they get batched, right? So to be a global scale system, there's inevitably going to be batching that occurs. The other thing is we have to talk about metadata embedding for these things. So you may be familiar with FATF regulations. So you think about things like the travel rule or other such things. And there's a very real possibility that there's going to be an increasing demand, globally speaking, to start putting things like a DID or some identifier into a transaction, encrypted or unencrypted. And there's also going to be an increasing demand to start putting some sort of notion of why is this transaction happening. It could even just be a hash of that information, but somebody has to have the pre-image or something like that. So this has a lot of impact on your scalability of your system, because we're not just talking about a fixed finite thing, we're talking about something linked to something else of flexible size, depending upon the jurisdictions that they happen to live in. And there may be cases where it can only settle within certain domains, but it can't settle in other domains. So it's a very complicated question. So, you know, Satoshi was very smart in the design of Bitcoin. He tried to keep things as simple as possible and purposely prevented people from doing lots of things. And then we opened the Pandora's box with Ethereum, and then you'll notice every single fork of the system has involved something involving gas. because that's just a model that we haven't figured out how to get right yet. So I don't have a great answer for that question, because it's one of those, it depends on what you're doing with the system, the accounting model of the system, the consensus model of the system, what is ultimately on-chain versus off-chain, whether you can batch things or not batch things, and so forth. And you're not going to get a static answer there. That's contingent on a lot of things. Next question. In the back.
Right. First of all, thank you for coming to this conference, and also everything you've been done into the space.
Thanks for the hospitality.
Thank you.
I mean, the Canadian flag's everywhere. It's great.
My question is more like a general question. Kind of want to see your vision of where Cardano is going to be in 5 or 10 years from now. I was watching one of your talks, the TED Talks, that the future will be decentralized in the future. Just kind of curious of where Cardano is going to be in 5 or 10 years from now.
As this is an Ethereum Classic summit, I'm not going to talk too much about Cardano, but you know, the point of Cardano was to explore what is a financial operating system. So you look at countries like Ethiopia, and they're incomplete. They don't have good compliance systems. They don't have a stock market. There's really not stable markets there. They have capital controls. Their currency doesn't work so well. It's difficult to get money in, money out. If I'm a business there, I have limited options on how I handle things. And so we said, well, if we go to America, we have all this great stuff, or Germany, we have all this great stuff, but we're missing something there. So it'd be nice to have an alternative system that comes batteries included and has all these things you can do. So it's easy to incorporate your business, it's easy to issue a security, it's easy to trade, it's easy to hold an offering for like an ICO, whatever the heck that is. And so when we wrote those business requirements out, it turns out your system has to do a lot of stuff. So the vision of Cardano is to do that stuff everywhere at a scale that's global, so millions to billions of users, and to do that in a way that's sustainable, meaning there's always a way to decide how to upgrade the system, and there's always a way to pay for the upgrades of the system. So we call those the 3 pillars of a 3rd generation cryptocurrency. Now, you have to have product owners, you have to have business requirements, you have to have users to actually know this, which is why we physically went to Ethiopia. It's why we physically went to Rwanda and Uganda. And I think John O'Connor, our Director of African Operations, has gone to over 20 countries in Africa. And I personally went to a lot of them too. And I went to Mongolia and I went to Georgia. And for those of you who follow my Twitter, it wasn't just all fun. There were some hard times too. And a lot of the conversations there were, if you could have ideal markets, what would they look like? And what would you do differently from what the United States has done and those markets have done? So the vision of Cardano in 3 to 5 years is to realize those requirements we've gathered as we've been traveling, and that's why it's kind of a free-flowing project. There are certain foundational things that have to be done with respect to consensus and ledger design and so forth, and foundational things that have to be done with the programmability of the system and the democratic elements of the system. But then moving forward, after those foundational things are done, it's application-driven, just like this ecosystem is application-driven, or Ethereum is application-driven. Those applications and their dreams and hopes are what inform the design of your system for the next generation and the next generation. And if we've done our job correctly, it will not require centralized curation. Those evolutions will be done through an improvement proposal process funded by a decentralized treasury. Next question. Yes, sir.
It's a great vision for a truly democratic and open world that we have going forward. But the key word there is DeFi you were talking about. I just want to know, in your opinion, how long it will take for the mainstream to kind of catch up this Ethiopia of working model.
When there are financial incentives to do something, it gets done, regardless if it's legal or not, regardless if the government likes it or not. That's why we have a war on drugs in America, and it's losing very quickly, right? We've been fighting it for a long time. So it doesn't particularly matter if there's consent. It just matters if can people make money? Can people have a livelihood? Can people live better in this alternative economy than they could live in the old economy? And that's really the mission. So the technology has to be sufficiently usable, distributed, and good enough and resilient enough to permit that. Which is why it's incredibly important to have diversity, because A, we don't know which system is going to win, so we need a lot of choices, and B, it's incredibly important to have privacy within that diversity, because certain regimes will just simply ban the technology, either because they want to protect incumbents or sheer just incompetence, and they have no idea what the hell is going on. And, you know, it's the same thing. First they ignore you, and then they fight you. right? And that we're kind of entering that phase. Libra has forced that conversation. And for the next 5 years or 10 years, our industry is probably going to go through some rocky times, especially in certain jurisdictions. Jurisdictions that hate freedom are going to be the very first ones to ban cryptocurrencies and have already done so, or try to control or regulate them, because they understand if this technology spreads, it gives economic freedom to people, and once they've tasted economic freedom, they cannot accept totalitarianism. It's an inoculation against dictatorship, so it will eventually transform the society and overcome these centralized governments and bring them down. So as with all things that spread like a meme, people will fight it, but with all things that spread like a meme, everybody's going to see it. So it's an organic, natural thing, and it's driven mostly by self-interest and financial incentives, and then eventually it just becomes the standard, and then it's like saying we're going to get rid of the internet. You'd have a revolution if you tried to do that. People would fight you, or they'll find ways around it, even in places that are very restrictive. Next question. Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, when you refer to the economy of scale, which is completely respectable, how do you see the lack of maybe mining resources and node network resources to supply this economy of scale moving forward?
So I firmly believe if proof of work is going to survive, it desperately, desperately needs to have a useful component to it. It was an open question of whether proof of work was necessary for theoretical reasons and proof of stake could never match it. We firmly believe at IOHK proof of stake works. And this is an opinion forged by years of research and many, many papers. I understand people disagree with us. That's fair. But, let's say for the sake of the argument that of the top 10 cryptocurrencies, 8 or 9 of them are proof of stake systems, and they collectively control hundreds of billions of dollars, and people are happy, they're fairly decentralized, and there's no major attacks after 5 or 10 years. Then you really have to ask yourself, does it make sense to have a system that will always get more energy intensive and always get more centralized due to economy of scale? And if you're not there for theoretical reasons, then you don't have a moral authority. That said, we are collectively combining thousands and thousands of GPUs and CPUs and other things, especially for ASIC-resistant protocols. So that's just a lot of raw computational horsepower, and that could become the world's largest distributed computer if only we could find the folding at homes and the SETIs and the other things that we could run on these systems. And there have been some papers published about approaches that could be used to transform these puzzles into something that's useful to society. So that's the next great challenge. Can we use proof of work to do something other than digging holes and filling them back up again? Can we use them to either build a decentralized file system like what the Chia guys are doing, or can we use them to do raw computation like what Golem is trying to do, or these types of things? And it's a cool question, and it's something we actually look at and we think about in our organization. And since we're still doing proof of work research, I think it's the only ethical research that remains. I no longer consider proof of work just viable as it stands. It needs to be transformed into something else. Otherwise, there won't be enough nodes. And also, it's a weird equilibrium where you have a mercenary force who live outside of your system, who don't necessarily have tokens in your system and can mine any system they want, securing you. So they're here today, they're here tomorrow. What killed Rome is when mercenaries started defending Rome instead of Romans. They decided to sack the country instead of save it. Anyway, my personal opinion. I know some people disagree. Next question. Come on, there's got to be at least one more. All right then. Well, thank you all for coming. This was a heck of a lot of fun. Please do enjoy the hospitality of Vancouver. I hear there are many lovely eating establishments. And if you do get some pancakes tomorrow, there is maple syrup. Cheers.
Oh. We have to get a picture. If you can come here. We have to get the...
They turned... Oh, okay. Bob, if you're going to be up here with me in that maple syrup, we have to take a shot together.
We can.
Let's do it.
Who's going first? Look, you've got one yourself.
You ready?
What, have we got to clink the bottles together?
All right, you ready?
Woo! That's good stuff. It is.
Yeah.
It's anyone who hasn't had proper maple syrup and has only had shitty syrup that's made of corn starch or whatever
So-
it is. Try it.
So
For
I
goodness
didn't
sake.
know you could put bourbon in these things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, Charles, thank you so much for coming. It's been a delight to spend time with you and, you know, to really welcome you to my hometown and welcome you into the ETC community where you've contributed so much. And, you know, I really look forward to seeing how we can all, you know, work together and we have aligned incentives and let's do some good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bob, for the hospitality and putting all this on. Cheers.
Cheers.